This isn't a huge amount of content, but I did want to talk about language because I always think it's so important, and I really like to take any opportunity that I can to speak about language. I've slightly changed what was on the sheet, so I'm going to talk about how to talk about men's violence against women without talking about men, and there are plenty examples in our common cultural discourse of exactly how to do that. So I thought you might all like to behold a bit of, we talk a lot about female erasure, but I really feel it's time to say, what about the men, and talk about male erasure, because I think they've just been shrinking violence and they haven't been getting enough attention. So this is what I'm going to look at. Next slide, please. So these last few years, in terms of all the transgender stuff, gender identity, ideology, whatever we call, or whatever we want to call it, of men pretending to be women, I think has certainly really highlighted the importance of simply, if we do nothing else, simply naming men as men. And actually, if we do that, we often don't really need to do much more, because that in effect exposes the lie of transgenderism. So naming men as men has been, not everyone got this immediately. There have been a few, I would say, quite willfully obstinate people who were still calling them she, her until like 5 minutes ago. And now they're taking all the credit for being like, oh, he's a man, so I'm going to call him he. But anyway, a lot of us in this room were stressing the importance of naming men as men and exposing the fact they are men, because then everything else follows from that. So we've got, I thought I'd begin with a rather glorious example of a woman stealing back men's power of naming men as men. Kelly J. Keane, a couple of years ago at the swimming championships, where she called out, he's a man. And I just think that is a brilliant example of what Andrea Dworkin described as Prometheus stole fire from the gods, so we have to steal back the power of naming from men. And I couldn't think really of a more enjoyable example than that one. And I know Cara yesterday was referring to this chap as Will Thomas, but I think his name, Liar Thomas, is actually really wonderful. So next slide, please.
Willie Thomas?
Well, Willie, yeah, Liar Willie, yeah, exactly. It's all very appropriate. Right. So, the crucial importance of language. I just wanted to introduce the talk by revisiting some of the really great minds of our movement that we've been lucky enough to be inspired by and learn from. And they've drawn attention to the importance of naming. So, much quoted Mary Daly, women have had the power of naming stolen from us. Andrea Dworkin taking Mary's lead there. Men have the power of naming, a great and sublime power. The power of naming enables men, it's quite a long quote, but I'll just cut it down. This power of naming enables men to determine what can and cannot be expressed, to control perception itself. And that's what I want to talk about in this talk, the control of our perception. Julia Penelope, who I'm going to be drawing on quite a lot in this talk, and I did a couple of talks on Speaking Freely, her book, brilliant book on the lies of the father's tongue. She says, patriarchal thought controls and limits the ways we live in the world. Patriarchal assumptions structure the language we speak, and we'll be looking at exactly what she means by this, the structure of language, the primary mediator of our experience. So radical feminists, lesbian feminists saw this key relationship between the language that we use, how language shapes our perception, who controls the language, and then what is possible in terms of our own thinking and expression from that. And I think if everyone had paid a bit more attention, oh, see, I'm starting to get really riled up. If everyone had paid a bit more attention, or even opened a bloody book by any of these women, they would not have started from this position of being kind. Because I'm really sick now of the number of women who decide that they're going to speak on all our behalf and say, oh, we all start off from a position of being kind, and then after a while we realise that we're being taken for a bit of a ride and these men want to come in our spaces, so then we gradually sort of, withdraw this kindness. No, some of us did not start from a position of being kind. Some of us knew our onions when it came to the so really, those women who actually are still being, quite vocal spokeswomen for the gender critical movement, I really feel you are really, it would behove you to have a look at this before going on about the kindness business and how we've all had this same journey. We actually, some of us really learn from these women and we understand the crucial importance of naming. Okay, next slide, please. So this is what I want to look at in terms of what we see around us, the discourse around male violence against women. So Julia Penelope describes several of the linguistic ways men perpetuate their dominance. And I really like that she had such a brilliant technological, or technical is that the right word? She had a really technical understanding of linguistics. She was a brilliant professor of linguistics. So she could talk about things like the use of abstraction and abstract nouns that then refuses to be explicit about events in the world. The attribution of agentive status, sorry, I was doing like this technical language myself, but she basically means the attribution of being an actor to abstract or inanimate objects. And that's what we're going to look at here and how it obscures who's doing what to who. So next slide, please. Okay, so this is because of the work that I've been involved in for a number of years, support services or interventions around male violence, men's violence against women. And I just noticed over and over again the same kind of linguistic patterns and how it is erasing. Well, I don't want to give it away too much. We're going to explore it together, hopefully. So I just did a very, very simple, very quick study of taking 3 articles about male violence against women that have all been written within the last year. I think, it's a bit blurry, but I think this one was from February, this one was from last August, and this one was just from a couple of days ago. You might have seen some ONS statistics that have just come out. So all I did was a search in the BBC, because they have a whole sort of category of, they don't call it men's violence, they just call it violence against women. So I just did a search in that under that category, and then I just kind of pretty much randomly selected these 3 from the past year. So this article here, violence against women and girls endemic, rising reports of violence against women on transport, 1 in 8 women assaulted, abused, or stalked. But pretty much probably everyone's seen it. It's almost on a weekly basis, certainly like every couple of weeks. Isn't there some kind of report where it's either the head of the Met Police or some, I don't know, some politician or some media outlet coming out with some new research that says, yeah, we've got an epidemic of male violence against women. I mean, why they keep saying the same story over and over again, and it's never getting less, it's always getting more. The criminal justice system is, totally not coping with the extent of it. So I thought, right, let's just have a look at these. And then I thought, let's just do a very simple check to see who they're talking about. So already we've got this violence against women and girls, against women, and 1 in 8 women still. So we can see it's going to be about women, but let's see exactly who it's about. So if we go to the next slide, please. So what I did was simple search. I did a simple word search of women, girls, people, and men. And I did that for all 3 articles. And the results, I must say, were even more striking than I possibly anticipated. So for this one, I'm not going to look at the whole article. They're all very, very similar. They're sort of standard length articles. So I did a word search of women, 9 results in that article. What you might think, yeah, to be expected. Girls, 8 results. People, even this sort of neutral word people, 3 results. Then something really strange happens. 5 men, option search whole words, because obviously men is in women and government and whole words. Can you see that? No results found. So it doesn't mention men at all. Next one, please. So then this was a report, particularly, I think this is London, Transport for London, the British Transport Police Authority came out with this research, or sorry, just the number of recorded violent crimes by the British Transport Police against women and girls had risen by 20% that year. So I did the same thing. Maybe it was a slightly longer article, I don't know. Women here, 14 results. Girls, slightly less, 9. Even people, so I say it's a neutral term, people had 2. Interestingly, find, men, whole words, no results found. So interesting, isn't it? It's just all this violence happening that's going up, and however many of us are affected, but it's no one seems to be doing it. Okay, next slide, please. So this was the 3rd article that I looked at. 1 in 8 women, as I say, you might have seen this, it just literally came out a couple of days ago. 1 in 8 women assaulted, abused, or stalked. And this was the crime survey published by the ONS, where they put these things together, sexual assault, domestic abuse, and stalking, and then they were giving us statistics on that. So let's see. I think it was a bit of a shorter article. Women, 7 results. Girls, there's only 1 result, and I think that's maybe because this was looking at over 18s, I think, but in the research. People had 6 results. And men, finally, we get a mention of men. So I thought, okay, we've got 1 mention of men. So I went and had a look at where men were mentioned. And men are mentioned here as victims of sexual assault. So again, no one's actually doing any of these things. It's just these random events that are happening. And actually, I don't know, it's very blurry. You probably can't see it. I think this is a totally, this to me undermines the whole thing, because this is so clearly completely wrong. It says that that the incidence of sexual harassment and stalking and domestic abuse is higher for women. Women have experienced 12.8% of women have experienced, as opposed to 8.4% of men, suggesting that there's only a 4% difference. That's such clear bollocks. Sorry, like really, it just undermines everything they're saying. It's so obviously wrong. That's nonsense. And someone in the next slide, one of the representatives, I think from Women's Aid, does actually illustrate that. But it just shows that however they asked the questions, they got totally incorrect information. So if we go on to the next slide, please. So this is, I think, is quite interesting, that we've got endless discourse about male violence against women, men's violence against women, endlessly going on about it, and solutions, and now the government want to halve, they're setting out this target halving this abstract thing, but everyone's too polite to mention who's actually doing any of it. So I think Julia Penelope here is very instructive, because she exposes that the way, if you want to erase men from the picture, this is what you do. You put what's happening, you put it into the passive form, and I'll look at some concrete examples of this. You delete agency, and then I know it's a bit silly, you might not like this, it's a bit like that dry stuff that you didn't like in the other book that we did, but there's something I just find very satisfying about this passive nominalization. So when you take a verb and turn it into a noun, and then you blame that for the thing. Anyway, we'll have a look at the great example from Julia Penelope, I think is coming up on the next slide. Yeah, so this was Julia. I have changed it a bit. I've made it a little bit more up to date, and I've elaborated it. But this is Julia Penelope's wonderful story of the disappearing man. So she has this scenario where we've got a heterosexual couple, John and Mary. And so let's say then that there's an event that happened. John assaulted Mary. So it's an active verb, isn't it? That we know who's done it, who's the subject is John. He assaulted, the verb, and we know the object of that assault was Mary. So it's really clear. John was the subject, he assaulted Mary. It's really clear who's done what to who. That's it. Now, we can shift our focus a bit more onto Mary by simply putting that into the passive form and saying Mary was assaulted by John. So it's still telling us about the same event, but it's putting Mary at the beginning, and so we can we pay a bit more attention to her than we do to John. Now, if we want to make it all about Mary and get rid of John entirely, we can just say that Mary was assaulted. Now, I just have to put a bit of a caveat, because sometimes, obviously, in news reporting, it's true that a woman has been raped or killed, and sometimes, you know, they report things and they don't know who's done it. So sometimes it is unavoidable that is, you know, I realise that. But I don't think that's a sufficient explanation for the whole picture, what we go on to see. So that's the agency deletion. But then this is where we get this passive nominalisation, turning the action of John assaulting into a noun. We've got Mary is a victim of assault, and that's what we just had in that ONS thing, didn't we, of being a victim of this noun. And so what Julia Penelope says is that is attributing the agency and the responsibility to this abstract noun rather than to the man. But I think these are the ones that we see far more than any of the others. Mary is a victim of domestic abuse, where you've got an even more of an abstract noun of domestic abuse, which is quite it has got a definition, but it's quite a vague, encompassing term, isn't it, compared to something specific. And then Mary is a victim survivor, where it's all become about Mary's identity. And I think if we think of the kinds of news reports and, I don't know, media discussions and things that we see far more of these latter three things than we do of the earlier things. And so that is how to make John disappear. He's probably off. He's already met someone else who's probably abusing her by now while we're just busily thinking about Mary. So can I have next slide, please, Emma? So I thought I'll just go back and I'll go through these fairly quickly, but just to show what Julia Penelope is saying, how that actually plays out in these reports. So this was the last one from the ONS. So I've highlighted, oh, how do I do it now? I've highlighted in green, oh God, I've forgotten I've highlighted in green the passive, yeah, sorry, the passive, the passive form, can we go back? The passive form, I've highlighted in yellow that nominalisation, the turning it into a noun, or sometimes an abstract noun. And then I've actually put in light blue where you've got an active verb again. So I think this is really interesting. So we've got 1 in 8 women assaulted, abused, or stalked. So no one's doing it. It's just these things are happening to them. What are the things? They're victims of sexual assault, domestic abuse, or stalking. There's either nouns or some cases abstract nouns. And then we get an active voice here when it comes to what the government say they're going to be doing. So the government is representing itself as being an active agent. They're going to halve, but what are they going to halve? This abstract thing that isn't actually caused by anyone. That doesn't really inspire confidence in me. That they're going to sort of, it's like you're going to kind of go take arms up against some sort of cloud. And here that to tackle the national emergency of VORG, like it doesn't even get it, it just gets this sort of initials. So next slide, please. And then it continues with this passive here. They aggregated the data for the women and these men who are supposedly are these victims as well. But anyway, so here passive, 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 experience, talking, experience, all this passive form. And the next slide, please. Again here we've got the government again in this active position, government's commitment to ending violence. And then we've also got, I thought this was quite interesting. So we've got Sarah Davish, who was the head of research at Women's Aid. I think making a very good point in terms of the sort of semantic content of it, that she's saying, well, the data didn't consider the number of times each person was a victim. So maybe when they asked about stalking, a woman might be really seriously stalked and really terrified by this man who is stalking her, whereas a man might have dumped his girlfriend and maybe she sent him a text message after, and that counts as stalking. So they weren't looking at the impact or the frequency of these things. This is what she was saying. So she was making a good point. But I thought this construction is really interesting. We know that women encounter higher rates of repeat victimization. So actually women here are active, because if you encounter something, you're being active. But they're not encountering men. They're just encountering these abstract things like higher rates of repeat victimization. They might be, this is passive, they might be subject to coercive and controlling behavior, just this behavior. And then be seriously harmed or killed than male victims. And so this can all result in another very vague abstraction of gender asymmetry. So I think I just really wanted to draw your attention to the ways in which we have this endless discourse about men's violence against women without actually naming men or putting men even into the picture. And I think it's a bit like, I'm sure we can all think of examples of war situations. It's a bit like someone's talking about a situation of war or conflict without mentioning who's doing what. Like, we just don't hear that, do we? We always hear like who is, you know, which country is bombing or which country is attacking or whatever. We don't hear this kind of just this general, oh, we're going to stop this vague thing that isn't actually being done by anybody. So the next slide, please. So, and just to illustrate, there was, you can see this on YouTube, there was an activist roundtable, I think it was held a few months ago, where you've got all these different activists who, you know, these sort of women from different activist groups or NGOs who are active, combating this, or talking anyway about violence against women. And they go through the whole thing pretty much without naming men at all. So I just think it really is like death by a thousand cuts. It's just this endless discourse around men's violence against women that I don't feel confident that it's ever going to end or ever going to get anywhere, because it's constantly how to talk about male violence against women without it actually avoids the very thing that it sets out to do. Can I have the next slide, please? And I just thought I'd give some more examples for us to think about, because I just see these this attribution of agency to abstract nouns over and over and over again, to like, see a point you can get quite desensitized by it. She was a victim of domestic abuse. She was in a violent relationship. Well, a relationship is a abstract noun. It's a concept. Her relationship can't be violent. She was in a relationship with a violent man. She left an abusive man. She didn't leave an abusive relationship. But over and over again, and I think it's also how we hear women speaking about our own experience, because this is the language we hear all the time. So I've heard women who have left violent men also saying, oh, I was in an abusive relationship. I left an abusive relationship. And it is, yeah, I can't even think of when I heard a woman actually refer specifically to a man. She was a victim of domestic homicide. She was a victim of femicide. And then I think also I've heard I've actually quoted this from a conference I was at, where they were talking about women, such a bizarre abstraction, women affected by prostitution, as if the woman is here, the prostitution is over there, and then she's just being affected by it. It's a really strange construction. Now, obviously, I think we'd all agree it's very important to use the word prostitution compared to sex work or, you know, something like that. But at the same time, I don't think we should just sit back and think, oh, we've named prostitution rather than sex work, because I think if we're talking about it in this abstract way, it really it kind of obscures the reality of it. And can I have the next slide, please? And so that's why I wanted to bring it right back to basics with, I think, this brilliant quotation from Andrea Dworkin, where she does the opposite. Instead of abstracting everything and denying the agency and replacing it with these abstract words, she says here in this piece, Prostitution and Male Supremacy, she says, I want to bring us back to basics. Prostitution, what is it? It's the use of a woman's body for sex by a man. He pays money, he does what he wants. The minute you move away from what it really is, you move away from prostitution into the world of ideas. And isn't that what we're doing with all these other things? We're moving away from what that man has done to the woman into this world of ideas. And what she says here, I think, is so brilliant. You will feel better. You'll have a better time. You'll certainly probably earn more money. It is more fun. There's plenty to discuss over and over and over and over again, but you will be discussing ideas, not prostitution. Prostitution is not an idea. It is the mouth, the vagina, the rectum, penetrated usually by a penis, sometimes hands, sometimes objects, by one man, and then another, and then another, and then another, and then another. That's what it is. Isn't that a hugely different way of framing prostitution than saying women who are affected by prostitution? It's just completely different. So can I have the last? And I wonder as well, again, maybe just something to think about, but I think in some ways it's important that we do have all these names for these different men who are doing these different things. Like something I hear all the time in my work is perpetrator, rapist, paedophile. I forgot autogynephile, transvestite, abuser. But I think what all these words do is also serve to sort of mask the collectivity of men, because it's saying there's this group here that are the autogynephiles, there's these groups that are the porn consumers, there's this group here that are the paedophile. Well, paedophile, I don't think we should be saying at all. Like anyway, but I think if we constantly say men who kill, men who kill women, men who sexually assault women, men who rape children, men who cross-dress, men who do woman face, men who are, we're constantly reminding ourselves that we're talking about this collective of men, men who watch porn, and also men, the man who directed that film, the man who runs this company. The more we just say the word men, we really put them into the picture and we see the continuity of all these things. So last slide then. So I think sometimes with this question of naming people, think, oh, it doesn't really matter, or oh, you have to meet people where they are, and all this kind of thing. But I think to go right back to that early slide, insights of Julia Penelope, of Andrea Dworkin. Does it matter? Well, as Dworkin said, the power of naming enables men to determine what can and cannot be expressed and to control perception itself. So I think in this area of men's violence against women, this constant erasure obscures men's responsibility for their actions, completely obscures it, vanishes it, in fact. It impedes then our understanding and also the extent of it. It really impedes our understanding of what men are doing, how men are behaving in the world, what they're doing to women. And it also, if we're looking at it as a problem, it actually totally misframes the problem. And anyone who's ever set out to try and solve any kind of problem in life, probably all of us in some way or another, knows the importance of how you frame that problem. It's not just how you understand it, but it also determines the approach that you might take to solving it. It kind of invites certain options as being desirable or necessary, and it also can envisage or really limit the kinds of solutions that are possible. So I think as long as we continue to erase men from what they're doing, then we might as well not bother with all these endless articles and the endless roundtables and discussions, because actually we're just going round and round in a circle and we're never quite landing on what we're actually talking about.